Is it possible to engage critically and intellectually with our faith? Love your neighbour as yourself. Regardless of where we land on the spectrum of religious belief, caring for others as we would ourselves is something to which many of us would subscribe. It's evident in our collective response to the pandemic, where families, organisations and communities of all faiths and none have come together to help the most vulnerable in our fight against the coronavirus. Many of us, in some small or larger way, have indeed loved our neighbour as ourselves. And yet, it's interesting that when we see this famous phrase mentioned in the New Testament passages of the Bible, there is also another instruction which precedes it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. So love God with your heart, for sure. Maybe even with your strength and soul. But can we love God with our minds? My name is Clare Williams, and I'm going to be joining you for this Jude 3 project series as we think together about the seemingly contradictory concepts of faith and reason. Is it possible to engage critically and intellectually with our faith? Now, whilst the past year may have brought us closer relationally to our loved ones as we appreciate them more precisely because of social distancing, some of us may have experienced a distancing in our faith, or if you're not religious, a declining of our hope. The very notion of the goodness of a loving God or a purpose-filled life may have been eroded by the suffering we have seen, the uncertainty we have felt, or the loneliness we have endured. In the place of faith, questions now arise and doubts begin to take root. Is my faith just wishful thinking? If I were born in another place and time, would I even consider Christianity as an option? Is there any evidence for what I believe? And what can be even more discouraging is when we articulate such questions aloud, only to find ourselves being silenced or viewed with suspicion. Perhaps we have felt that so-called blind faith has been the litmus test for true and genuine relationship with God. Maybe we experience a growing uneasiness with working hard and achieving academically and handling life's challenges with an analytical and reasoned approach, only to find that our faith seems to require the suspension of these faculties of the mind. And then, in addition to internal turmoil of a question in faith, external criticism of religious belief can also be quite disorienting. In his book, The God Delusion, atheist professor Richard Dawkins asserted, "When one person suffers from a delusion, it is called insanity. When many people suffer from a delusion, it is called religion." Now, the barb of Dawkins' assertion cuts deep. How can we navigate a cultural landscape which is not only hostile but increasingly indifferent to religious belief? And is faith just a form of intellectual suicide? But if we consider briefly the instruction to love God with our heart, our soul, strength and mind, it emerges in the New Testament passages as an answer to a question. In chapter 22 of the Matthew account, we learn that it is a lawyer, a member of the educated elite, who poses a question to Jesus. The lawyer would have been accustomed to the exercise of reason and faith, the ability to think critically and form logical judgments which inform one's faith position. And so he asked Jesus the question, which commandment is the first of all? To our modern ears, the depth and gravity of this question may be missed, but perhaps the secular equivalent of this question is, how can I live my best life? What is the most important thing in life? Or how do I be the best version of myself? And we should notice that Jesus did not shut down the question, even if it was coming from a less than honest place. In fact, there are many episodes like this one in the gospel accounts where Jesus was questioned. Jesus dignified the lawyer's question and welcomed his curiosity. And that welcome is open to us today too. You see, our doubts don't need to lead to a deconstruction of our faith, But as we wrestle with the deepest longings of our heart and the toughest questions of our minds, we can eventually find greater depth in our relationship with God. We can find, as Keener and Usery term it in their book, Defending Black Faith, a stronger and more credible case, unquote, for Christianity. Christianity is not simply an emotional high, and neither is it an intellectual low. Faith and reason are not antithetical. In his book, How Reason Can Lead to God, the philosopher Josh Rasmussen begins by sharing how questions and doubts caused his, and I'm quoting, belief in a cosmic purpose to recede away. And yet, in sitting with his objections, accompanied by a relentless pursuit of truth, Rasmussen followed the answers and evidence where it led. It eventually led him to belief in God. Doubts don't need to derail our faith. And I invite you to join me in this series as we explore not faith versus reason, not faith or reason, but faith and reason.